In my study, where the walls were clad in rich mahogany, I couldn't tear my eyes from my brother Sterling, smug face, as the lawyer unhurriedly read our parents' last will and testament. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, mingled with the aroma of disappointment, a particular blend that seemed to haunt every family gathering for the past 2 decades. Sterling, impeccably dressed in a custom-made suit worth several $1,000s, impatiently drummed his manicured fingers on the antique table, which, he undoubtedly believed, would soon be entirely his, along with all the other assets forming the foundation of the Reeves family empire. To my eldest son, Sterling Reeves, Mitchell Granger, the lawyer, announced, his solemn voice cutting through the silence like a judge delivering a verdict. I bequeath my entire real estate portfolio, including commercial properties, rental units, and prospective development projects with a total appraised value of $41 million. Sterling didn't even try to hide his jubilation. He ostentatiously adjusted the Rolex on his wrist, the very gold watch Dad always wore to every important business meeting, and let out a barely audible chuckle, which he tried to mask as a cough. Mom shifted restlessly in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were white. Uncle Wen, standing by the window, turned away from us, his weathered gaze fixed on the parking lot below, as if trying to decipher the mysteries of the universe and its contours. And to my son, Colton Reeves, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses on the bridge of his nose as if doubting the accuracy of what he read. I leave Sea Dreams, my 1987 Boston Whaler fishing boat, currently docked at Marina Bay, slip number 7. The ensuing silence was so profound that I could distinctly hear the monotonous hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Sterling, his chair creaked mournfully as he leaned back, then he burst into thunderous laughter. It wasn't a restrained chuckle, nor a nervous giggle, but a booming explosion of mirth that filled every corner of the study. Well, at least the loser gets something, right, Colt? Sterling turned to me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Maybe you can catch your dinner on it. God knows you'll have to pinch every penny now. The lawyer delicately cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before him. There are no other provisions or conditions in the will. Mr. Vernon Reeves was extremely precise regarding the distribution of assets. $41 million versus perhaps $8,000 on a very good day, if a buyer desperate or drunk enough could be found for that rusty old tub. The disparity in numbers was so blatant it seemed like an absurd joke. Only no one else was laughing. My daughter Penny, a 16-year-old with a stronger character than any lawyer in that room, rose decisively from her seat in the corner. Grandpa always said the value of a thing isn't in its cost, she stated, her voice even and confident, but what it means to you. Sterling snorted dismissively. Well, then that boat must mean Colton will stay exactly where he always has been, at the bottom. But what no one present knew, not Sterling with his Harvard MBA, nor the lawyer with his 40 years of experience, nor even Mom, who had been married to Vernon Reeves for 45 years, was that Dad never did anything without a good reason. Vernon Reeves was a man who planned his dinners a week in advance, who always had backup plans for his backup plans, who once spent 6 months researching and choosing the best brand of paperclips for his office. And that rusty, forgotten fishing boat, languishing in a marina on the other side of town, was meant to teach me the most valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes the humblest gifts hold the biggest secrets, and sometimes a father's love is measured in millions of dollars, but in the belief in your ability to find what lies beneath the surface. I had lived 38 years in my older brother's shadow, but not the kind of shadow that offers cool relief on a hot day, rather the kind that completely blocks out the sun, condemning everything beneath it to a perpetual struggle for survival. While Sterling successfully graduated from Harvard Business School and immediately after joined Dad's real estate empire, I chose construction work. I preferred calloused hands to manicured nails, a hard hat to Harvard ties, and concrete foundations to corporate structures. Honest work, Dad would usually reply when asked about his younger son, his career choice, though his voice always carried a slight note of justification rather than pride. As if he were trying to explain why Vernon Reeves, a man who built an entire empire from a single rental property, had a son working for an hourly wage with the possibility of odd jobs. Vernon Reeves was a true legend in our town. He started from scratch in distant 1975 with only a dilapidated duplex he bought at a foreclosure auction for just $12,000. He renovated it himself, working nights and weekends without quitting his main job at the sawmill. By the time I was born in 1986, he already owned 30 properties, and by the time I graduated from high school, he had over 200 commercial buildings in 3 states. The Reeves name adorned office complexes, shopping centers, and apartment buildings from Pennsylvania all the way to Georgia. From Pennsylvania to Georgia, the shadow of comparison stretched. Life in my father's house felt like playing an understudy, where the lead role was forever reserved for someone else. Sterling, my older brother, seemed 4 years older and 40 years wiser, at least if the report cards proudly displayed on the refrigerator door were to be believed. His achievements were always in plain sight, while mine got lost somewhere beneath grocery lists and dentist appointment reminders. "Look at your brother closing that mall deal, Dad," his voice would boom at dinner, as a newspaper with Sterling's photo in the business section slid across the table. 26 years old, and he's already managing 10 properties. That's foresight. That's real vision. Meanwhile, I was pouring concrete foundations for other people's ambitions, coming home covered in dust and exhaustion, while Sterling tallied commissions and received congratulations. I scrubbed dried concrete from under my nails, and he polished his cufflinks. I put ice on my aching back while he celebrated another acquisition at the country club. But despite everything, I harbored no resentment. In fact, I loved my work. Something primal, something true about construction. When you pour a foundation, it either holds or it doesn't. No tricks, no marketing fluff, no creative accounting, just the harsh truth measured by load-bearing capacity and structural integrity. My daughter Penny understood this better than anyone in the family. She had been my compass since the day she was born, 2 weeks after her mother realized that life with a simple construction worker wasn't the fairy tale she had dreamed of. Penny spent every other week with me, and those weeks were full of meaning. "Dad, you build things that last," Penny said, catching me looking at another newspaper article about Sterling. "Uncle Sterling just shuffles papers." Anyone can sell what's already there. You create something from nothing. But even Penny couldn't hide her confusion when we gathered for the will reading 2 weeks after Dad's funeral. Cancer had taken him swiftly, unexpectedly. 1 month he was closing deals, the next he had closed his eyes forever. Sterling, of course, took charge of all the arrangements, turning Dad's funeral into a kind of social event for his real estate partners. Mom sat quietly in the corner of the lawyer's office, clutching tissues in her hands. Her black dress made her look even more fragile than her 67 years. "Your father always had reasons for everything," she whispered to me before Mitchell Granger began to read. "Even when we didn't, to understand them, he always had his motives." Uncle Wen stood by the window, his weathered face impassive. He and Dad had started their business together in the 70s, 2 brothers who had nothing but ambition and a shared set of tools. But in the early 90s, something happened that the family preferred not to discuss. One day, Wen was vice president of Reeves Development, and the next, he left, starting his own small construction firm on the other side of town. He still attended family gatherings, sent Christmas cards, but between him and Dad, there always hung a heavy atmosphere of unspoken words, like a conversation that never happened. "Vernon was extremely precise regarding the distribution," Mitchell Granger said, adjusting his glasses and arranging papers before him as if preparing for a decisive battle. "No provisions for contestation are included. What I'm about to read is final and legally binding." The office suddenly felt cramped, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with tense anticipation. Sterling leaned forward in his chair, already mentally calculating interest rates and investment opportunities. I sat in my only suit, the one I wore to my high school graduation, wondering why Dad had even insisted on my presence at this meeting. The humiliation burned more intensely than any injury sustained on a construction site. Falling beams had hit me, concrete had eaten through my work gloves, I even broke 3 ribs during a scaffolding collapse in Pittsburgh. But nothing compared to the pain I felt sitting in that office, watching $41 million go to Sterling, while I received only an old boat, worth perhaps $8,000 on a good day, if the buyer was generous and a little drunk. Sterling was in high spirits, Generosity and alcohol made him particularly garrulous. Colton couldn't hide his disgust. His older brother approached, placing a hand on his shoulder with a feigned solicitude that sent shivers down his spine. "Hey, Colt, if you need gas money, don't hesitate to ask. Family always supports family, right?" Sterling feigned friendliness. "I understand the boat hasn't been out to sea in a while, but I'm sure we can get it running. Maybe you could even start your own little fishing charter business. I might even invest, give you a small startup loan." Mitchell Granger, the lawyer, awkwardly rearranged his papers. "If there are no questions regarding the distribution of assets, we can proceed to sign the documents." "No questions," Sterling assured him, pulling out his expensive Mont Blanc pen. "Everything is perfectly clear. Father knew what he was doing." The next morning, Colton headed to Bayside Marina, where his father kept his yacht, Sea Dreams. The security guard at the gate looked at him with a mix of pity and bewilderment when Colton announced he was there to claim his inheritance. "Slip 7, the guard pointed. "Though I must say your father hasn't taken that boat out in about 5 years, I reckon. Just sits there like a monument." The yacht indeed sat at the end of the slip, like a forgotten memory. The paint was peeling, revealing rusted metal, and the deck was covered in bird droppings. Sea Dreams, a 28-foot 1987 Boston whaler, looked every bit its 38 years. The vinyl seats were cracked and faded under the scorching sun, and the engine compartment likely housed a rust museum. Even the mooring lines seemed ashamed to hold the vessel. Harold, the marina manager, approached with a cup of coffee in hand and a sympathetic look. He was in his 60s and had probably seen hundreds of boats and thousands of family dramas unfold on these docks. "Your father loved this boat," he said, leaning against a piling. "Came here every Sunday until his health declined about a year ago. But strangely, he never took it out, just sat in the cabin for hours. Sometimes he would write something in a notebook, sometimes he just stare at the water." "Probably hiding from Sterling's real estate presentations," Colton muttered, stepping aboard and feeling the deck sag slightly under his weight. "By the way, your brother was here yesterday," Harold casually remarked, "taking pictures of the boat, saying something about helping you sell it. Even offered to buy it himself for $10,000, said he, to turn it into a planter for one of his commercial properties." The thought of Sterling turning his father's boat into a decoration for a shopping center was simply unbearable. That evening, his mother called while Colton sat in the kitchen, examining the ownership documents for Sea Dreams. "Colton, don't hold a grudge," she said in a soft but firm voice. "Your father saw something in you that you might not see in yourself. Yeah, he saw someone worth $8,000. Message received, Mom." That boat meant a lot to him, before the business took off, before money changed everything. He bought it with his first real paycheck from the sawmill, said it symbolized freedom, opportunities. He took you on it when you were little, before Sterling got too busy with his advanced classes and summer internships. Colton didn't remember those trips. Or perhaps he had forced himself to forget them. Like all other memories from before Sterling became the crown prince of the Reeves Empire. Later that same evening, Sterling sent him a photo. He was sitting in his former study, feet on the desk, holding a bottle of champagne. The caption read, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown, but someone has to do it. Let me know when you want to sell the boat. The $10,000 offer still stands." Penny found Colton in the garage, sifting through boxes of his father's old photographs and documents, trying to find some explanation for why his father had treated him this way. "Are you going to sell it?" she asked, sitting beside him on the concrete floor. "The boat? I get it. We still need to fix the truck's transmission, and Sterling's offer would cover the costs with plenty to spare." His gaze involuntarily fell on a photograph of his father, captured aboard Sea Dreams, with a young Colton in his arms. Their faces beamed with smiles, as if they had just discovered untold treasures. "Grandpa always thought through every step in minute detail," he mused aloud. A memory surfaced of a 10th birthday gift, an old compass. Many had considered it useless, just a tarnished piece of brass. But it turned out that compass had belonged to his father during World War II, guiding a bomber navigator through 37 successful combat missions. Sometimes the humblest gifts hold the greatest stories, his grandfather, his words echoed. 3 days later, He decided to take Sea Dreams out for one last trip before putting her up for sale. To sell the boat without ever taking her to sea felt sacrilegious, like discarding a letter unread. It was a duty to his father, a final journey on a boat he had cherished for 3 decades, despite not understanding the reasons for such an attachment. The morning was crisp and clear, like an October postcard, transforming the marina into a picturesque scene. Harold helped him check the engine, and to everyone, a surprise, it started on the first try. "Your father asked me to maintain it monthly," Harold explained, wiping his hands with a rag. He paid for 5 years in advance, even before his passing. Full package, including engine service, hull cleaning, and system checks. 5 years for a boat he never used. Harold merely shrugged, but his gaze held more knowledge than he was willing to share. He said you'd understand when the time came, and he also said, if you ever think about selling it, make sure everything is checked twice before you decide. He spent the morning meticulously inspecting the boat, inch by inch. Partially, it was to assess her condition before selling, partially to grasp what his father had seen in this floating puzzle. The deck was surprisingly sturdy despite its appearance. The navigation equipment was modern, updated just 2 years prior, according to the installation dates. The cabin was small but impeccably clean, like a sanctuary. In the V-berth, behind the captain's chair, where his father apparently spent his Sunday mornings, a peculiar detail in the wooden paneling caught his attention. In the mahogany there was a barely visible seam, noticeable only if one was deliberately searching. The wood around it was polished to a shine, as if touched countless times over the years. Pressing on it yielded nothing. Trying to slide it also failed. His gaze fell on the helm, which showed unusual signs of wear in the full port position, as if someone had turned it sharply left far more often than required for ordinary navigation. Yielding to a sudden impulse, he turned the helm all the way to the left until it locked. A quiet click echoed through the cabin. The panel opened about an inch, revealing a hidden space. His heart pounded as he fully opened the panel, discovering a briefcase-sized compartment. Inside was a military-grade waterproof container, used by Navy SEALs for sensitive equipment, with a combination lock that seemed capable of withstanding even a nuclear blast. The combination of numbers flashed into his mind instantly, as if his father stood beside him, whispering it in his ear. March 18th, his birthday. Not April 22nd, Sterling's birthday. Not July 15th, his parents' wedding anniversary. His birthday. His hands trembled as he entered the digits. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to reverberate through his entire life. Inside the container, he found several thick paper envelopes, a stack of photographs, and a letter written in his father's unmistakable hand, the same neat handwriting he had used to sign report cards and birthday cards for 38 years. Colton, if you're reading this, you've finally taken the helm. Sinking heavily into the captain's chair, the very chair where his father had spent countless Sunday mornings, he opened the first envelope. It contained the incorporation documents for a company called Blackwater Holdings, LLC, dated 1992. The second envelope held bank statements from an account he had never heard of, with a balance that made his eyes blur, $43 million. The third envelope was thicker, filled with contracts and agreements for infrastructure development projects in 6 states. As he studied them, a pattern emerged that made his heart clench. Every major construction project he had worked on for the past 15 years was listed there. The overpass in Columbus, where he had spent 6 months installing rebar. The parking complex in Charlotte, where he had supervised foundation pouring. The water treatment plant in Savannah, where he had earned a reputation as one of the best concrete specialists in the Southeast. Blackwater Holdings was a silent partner in each of these projects. Carefully examining the contents of the container, Colton discovered photographs capturing his work on various construction sites over the years. Surprisingly, he had never known about these pictures. Each frame was neatly signed in his father, as handwriting, Colton leading the crew in Columbus, Colton solving a drainage problem in Charlotte, Colton training new employees in Savannah. It became evident that his father had been closely following his career, meticulously documenting every step. At the very bottom of the container, Colton found another envelope, marked with a single word: truth. Inside lay adoption papers, dated 1986, the year of his birth. Under biological father, the name Wen Reeves was written. Uncle Wen, who had stood silently by the window during the will reading, had left his father as company in the early 90s and watched as Sterling inherited $41 million while Colton received only a boat. At that moment, everything he knew about his life, like puzzle pieces, fell into place, revealing a completely different picture. His father, as letter explained everything in his usual methodical manner. Every sentence was carefully chosen, as if he were preparing a case for trial. Colton heard his voice in every word, that calm and confident tone his father used when explaining something important. Son, the real estate empire was always meant for Sterling. He needs the spotlight, the recognition, the visible success that comes with his name on buildings. He measures his worth in square footage and rent payments, in newspaper mentions and country club conversations. That is his nature, and I have come to terms with it. But you, Colton, you are like me before money changed everything. You understand that real wealth is not what people can see. It is what you build when no one is looking. Blackwater Holdings, that is my true legacy. A hidden partnership in infrastructure development across 6 states. Every major construction project you have worked on for the past 15 years was partly ours. You weren't just pouring foundations, son. You were building our empire brick by brick, beam by beam. While Sterling posed for press releases, you were building the skeleton on which half of the Southeast as development rests. The fishing boat was not an insult. It was a test. Could you honor my memory by taking her out one last time? Could you care for something that seems worthless? Sterling received what can be seen, the buildings with our name. You receive what truly matters, the unseen foundation on which everything rests. This company generates $8 million a year in passive income from infrastructure contracts. Now it is all yours. The documents are filed. You were the sole beneficiary from the day you started working in construction. And one more thing, check the second envelope. The adoption papers, dated 2 months before Colton's birth, stared up at him. The biological father, signature, faded blue, Wen Reeves. The adoptive father, as signature beneath it, Vernon Reeves. His mother, a signature to the side, confirming her consent to the arrangement. Behind the papers lay another letter, written in Wen's rougher hand. Colton, your mother and I were young and foolish. I was 22, she was 19. Vernon was already married to her for 2 years. It happened that summer when Vernon was in the hospital with appendicitis. We got into a situation we couldn't fix. When you were conceived, Vernon couldn't have children due to complications from his surgery. Your mother was desperate, ready to leave town, to abandon everything. But Vernon surprised us both. He said he would raise you as his own son. He said, every empire needs an heir, and blood doesn't make a family, choice does. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made, signing those papers. Vernon loved you more than you will ever know. He saw in you what he saw in himself, a man who builds real things, not just paper empires. The infrastructure business was his way to keep you safe, away from Sterling's envy and scrutiny. Sterling is my nephew, but he inherited the worst traits of the Reeves family pride, the need to be seen as superior. Vernon knew this and protected you from it, keeping you separate from the visible business. Vernon was your father in every way that mattered, but I wanted you to know the truth. You weren't just his son. You were his chosen successor in what truly mattered to him. My voice trembled as if I were 13 again when I dialed my mother's number. You knew? I asked. We all knew, dear, she replied calmly, as if she had been preparing for this conversation for 38 long years. Vernon insisted on raising you. He said the moment he held you in the hospital room, you became his son. Biology is just details. Confused, I asked why no one had told me. Mother explained that Vernon wanted me to grow up without that burden, to become who I was meant to be, not who I thought I had to be. Every Sunday, when he went to the boat, Vernon wrote in his journal about my successes, about the man I was becoming. He kept copies of every construction report with my name on it, every safety commendation, every project completed ahead of schedule. Sterling doesn't know. He only sees what he wants to see. He received wealth that can be counted, and I received a father's love that truly matters. The last document in the container was the transfer of ownership for Blackwater Holdings, dated a week before my father's death, making me the sole owner. It came with a note in my father's shaky handwriting. "The boat is yours, son. She isn't pretty, but she holds the truth. Take care of what matters. Let Sterling have the spotlight. You keep the foundation strong." That's what real builders do. I kept the boat and restored her to her pristine condition, not out of necessity, but because she represented something Sterling couldn't grasp. The smallest gifts often carry the greatest love. This 28-foot Boston whaler held more truth than Sterling, $41 million in real estate. The restoration took 3 months. I did most of the work myself, replacing every board, every screw, every part. Harold helped when he could, sharing stories about my father, his Sunday visits. One day, while installing a new navigation system, Harold said he'd sit in that captain's chair for hours. Sometimes I'd bring him coffee, and he'd write in his leather journal, looking at the water like he saw something no one else could see. Now I understand what he saw. He saw you. When Sea Dreams was finished, painted dark blue with gold trim, just like in the old photos, Harold smiled and shook his head. "Your dad would be proud. You know, he once told me that real wealth isn't what people can see. It's what you build when no one is looking." I thought he was talking about the boat. Turns out, he was talking about you. I never told Sterling about Blackwater Holdings. Let him have his spotlight, his press releases about the Reeves real estate empire, his photos in the business section of the newspaper. Every month when he boasts about his new acquisitions at family dinners, I quietly smile, knowing that the parking lot beneath him belongs to Blackwater. The utility infrastructure supporting him belongs to me. The foundation his empire stands on is mine, generating income Sterling doesn't even suspect exists. Now, Wen and I meet for coffee every Sunday at the same diner on Highway 47, where construction crews gathered even before I was born. "Vernon raised you right," Wen says every week, as if needing constant reaffirmation. "You could have exposed everything. Humiliated Sterling the way he humiliated you at that will reading. But you didn't that as Vernon in you, not me. I would have rubbed his face in it," to which I reply, stirring my black coffee, "just as Vernon used to." Father taught me that. The foundation doesn't need applause. It just needs to be strong. Penny sometimes goes out on the boat with me, usually on Saturday mornings when the water is calm and the marina is quiet. Last week, she brought her boyfriend, a nervous young man named Timothy, who works at his father's hardware store. Sterling showed up uninvited in his new Ferrari, trying to impress the boy with talk of millions in markets, international deals, and investment portfolios. After Sterling's 20-minute speech about wealth management, Timothy looked at me and asked, once at a dinner party, a guest, dazzled by Sterling's wealth, turned to me and asked about my line of work. Before I could answer, Penny, a young woman with the wisdom of old sea dogs, declared for all to hear, "My father builds things that will outlast us all. The rest is just noise." Late that night, when the house was empty, I discovered another letter from Dad, hidden deep within the old navigation table, among dusty charts and GPS instructions. The letter, written in a shaky but steady hand just a week before his passing, read, "Colton, true success is not measured by what you inherit, but by what you manage to create from what others deem useless. This boat is not just a pile of metal and wood. She is a symbol of trust. I believed you could see deeper, appreciate what eludes others, find treasure where everyone else saw only junk. You are not just my second son, you are my secret weapon. Real estate will enrich Sterling, the infrastructure company will bring you a fortune, but this old boat will make you my true heir. You are the only one who saw her true value when others saw only rust and peeling paint. This is the difference between money and the meaning of life. Sterling got a fortune, you got a future. Now, that letter is kept in my wallet, next to a yellowed photograph of Sea Dreams and a childhood picture of me, a 5-year-old boy, with my father in matching captain's hats, clearly too big for our heads. Sometimes, when Sterling calls to boast about another successful deal, I put him on speaker and take the boat out into the open bay. The sound of the waves drowns out my brother's voice, and I remember my father when his decision to raise another man, son as his own, about a love stronger than blood ties. Vernon Reeves left Sterling $41 million in visible real estate, a fortune evident to all. I received an $8,000 old fishing boat, holding within its depths a $43 million secret. But more importantly, this boat held proof that I was not just a son, but a partner, a chosen one, the foundation, and that was worth far more than all of Sterling's assets combined.